Today I have a breakdown for you around regulation and also the stablecoins. You guys don't want to miss it. It's going to be very interesting, so stay tuned right here. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back into Tech Path. All right, so let's get started. We've got a whole lineup of clips on compliance and also regulation opportunities for stablecoins and what that means for crypto. Let's start here with clip one. Listen in.
Senator Elizabeth Warren in December of last year claimed that digital asset firms in the United States are attempting to subvert anti-money laundering and terrorist finance laws. I believe that her claims are frankly blatantly false, and I think it is important to remind the public of all the work that your companies do to prevent illicit finance. Circle is the largest U.S.-based stablecoin issuer. Would you also provide an overview of Circle's anti-money laundering compliance program and describe the additional regulatory requirements that Circle must comply with?
A lot of it overlaps with what my colleague at Coinbase said is in his compliance program. We do robust KYC, sanction screening, SAR filing reports. These are all the aspects that a traditional financial firm has as well. Circle is regulated as a money transmitter in 48 states and jurisdictions. We're registered with FinCEN. These are the same type of regulations that PayPal and Venmo also comply with. We also employ blockchain analytics, so we use the ability to look at transactions on chain so that we can see illicit activity that might be using USDC, the stablecoin that we issue, and we're able to work with law enforcement when we see that activity or they alert us to activity as well.
All right, so they mentioned one thing there, and that was PayPal. So if you look at PayPal's stablecoin, PYUSD, you can kind of see over the last 6 months or so, it's continuing to grow on overall market cap. There is another clip I want to get to, because this is where Circle kind of goes head-to-head with Tether. Listen in.
Ms. Hill, given Tether's nexus to the U.S. financial system through Cantor Fitzgerald, does Treasury already have the authority to take action? And what should we be doing about American regulated companies like Cantor?
I would think that the Treasury Department would have the authority to take action given this U.S. touch point, yes. And I hope that they're looking at this seriously given Tether's reputation as well as the data that we've seen that they're contributing to terrorist financing and other malign activities.
Man, that's a heavy statement coming from Circle. Ironic too. I mean, you look at the market cap currently with USDC, actually getting a little bit of an uptrend here, which we've been tracking for a little bit down. I guess it had clipped down to a low around 23 billion, and now it's hovering around 28. So that's a pretty significant move. However, if you think that were to affect Tether, this of course is Tether's overall market cap, not necessarily doing anything but going straight up. And when you look at overall volume right now, just going to go on volume, Tether still holding the #1 position by a landslide, even over Bitcoin. And if you continue further down this list, guess what? You've got a Chinese FDUSD, which is a Chinese Hong Kong stablecoin that has now entered the fray. So it's something we've talked about here shortly. So further into this, remember, all of this happened around a couple of hearings, and we're going to show you two. One was this hearing right here from Patrick McHenry's office, Crypto Crime and Context, a little bit more. There's one particular person I want to pay attention to, which is the Senior Fellow of the Atlantic Council Executive in Residence and TerraNet Ventures. And we'll explain this, but this is Carole Noel House. And I want to break down a few points from her. Listen in.
The crypto industry claims that crypto makes it easier to catch criminals because it tracks each transaction. Can you discuss whether you agree with this claim and how DeFi services can complicate the matter?
We highlighted lots of different types of technical features and compliance controls that can be built in at different layers of the ecosystem that could focus, for example, at the network layer where miners exist. A good place to start might be something like sanctions. OFAC has already stated in their compliance guidance that miners may already have sanction screening obligations.
We have sanctions regimes in place to be able to target known bad actors for all kinds of things, including, in theory, fentanyl or, cartel activity. I'll note there are no financial institutions in Sinaloa, Mexico, sanctioned.
All right, so this is an issue that's continued back and forth. If you look at who Carole House is, this is one of her LinkedIn posts right here. And my work supporting President Biden's executive order on ensuring responsible development of digital assets. And then further into the company that she represents, which is TerraNet, This is a central bank digital currency research firm. So Terranet CBDC's model offers customers unique ability to basically build out a CBDC. So this is clearly a plan. It's also clearly has an agenda from a sense of what they're trying to do. And I think this is the thing that we continue to face here in DC. I want to go to another clip real quick because this gets into how law enforcement looks at crypto. Listen in.
Mr. Rabin, you were a prosecutor at the DOJ for over 10 years. Can you walk us through the process, how you used to identify illegal activity in digital assets, and touch on how law enforcement capabilities have evolved to what they are today? I think it highlights the BSA AML framework.
Frankly, law enforcement didn't know how to address it. But very quickly, law enforcement was able to incorporate blockchain analytics into its investigations. It almost was like shooting fish in a barrel. Once we saw they were using a certain transaction related to Bitcoin, they were almost certainly dead to rights. We would then immediately issue a subpoena to any cryptocurrency exchange that was connected with that transaction. And often within 24 hours, we would receive all of the evidence that we needed. Whereas if it was going to a bank account, we would wait weeks, if not months, and then have to use analysts to digest all of that data. In short, it was extremely burdensome and cumbersome to do this in the traditional financial space, as opposed to doing it in the cryptocurrency space.
Clearly, it shows that when you're dealing with blockchain, actually really the bad actors try to stay away from it for that very reason, and the fact that the blockchain is wide open, has full on-chain analysis. And I think that's the key point that for some reason Congress and our lawmakers keep missing. This is Lynch talking about Coinbase a little bit further. Listen in.
Mr. Rabin, so you're with Coinbase, is that right?
That's correct, Congressman.
And they're probably the largest in the country, right?
That is correct.
Yeah. So what troubles me is, and probably one of the better run platforms that we have, probably among the best. And I know last year we had problems at Coinbase. I know your company was required to pay I think it was $100 million or $50 million fine because your anti-money laundering protocols were not robust enough. And then they required you to put in another $50 million to make your anti-money laundering protocols more robust. What worries me is if a good company is having that challenge, it makes me worry. When there are gaps among our best run companies, less a reflection on you than it is on the technology itself and how difficult that can be.
This was kind of hypocrisy as well, because I think when you're dealing with companies like this, the fact that they are continuing to advance their technology in terms of protections is way ahead of what most financial institutions actually get to. And if you look at Coinbase's list, I had to go way down on the fines page and find Coinbase. That's right there. I'm kind of hovering over it. This was in 2023. There's the 100 million they were talking about right there. But I'm going to scan all the way up, and I have to go quite a ways to get into, because by the way, this is the violation tracker within the financial industry. And guess who's leading the top right there? Bank of America, 87 billion, obviously considerably more than what Coinbase is dealing with. JP Morgan, you recognize all these companies, of course, and that's the major monetary system that continues to contribute to these kind of problems. I want to go to this next clip because this gets into Sherman and Casten. You guys remember Sherman, but this is one for sure. You guys are going to love this. Listen in.
Please raise your hand if you will agree that if you would support legislation to make it illegal for Americans to do business with any exchange or other crypto service provider that ever uses a mixer. Let the record show no hands went up.
We trace the flow of funds across 29 different blockchains and about 70 million different assets today. So we are following the flow of funds across different blockchains, cross-chain swaps, across bridges, on all of those different blockchains.
I'm not saying you can't, but like we know that this North Korean hack that I think a number of people have said something like 45% of their military.
And absolutely fair. The speed and scale at which North Korea is attacking the ecosystem is an absolute problem. But the reality is that we are in fact tracing and tracking the flow of funds and making it much harder for them to find off-ramps.
Yeah, look, I'm sorry to cut you off because I'm going to get cut on time. I come back to what I said to start. I appreciate what you're trying to do. The criminals are smart, and when we talk about the fact that the global GDP, 2 to 5% of that is illicit finance, we have to stop lying and saying crypto is safer when we know what the bad guys are doing is not what we're talking about here. Illicit finance is a real problem. Let's not pretend it doesn't exist just because the place where we're looking doesn't show up. Thank you. I yield back.
Now, none of you have ever been successful criminals. I think I've got that right. You'll interrupt me if I'm wrong. So you don't know what it takes to be a successful criminal. You're here telling me that the successful criminals don't understand their business when they decide to use crypto. Since none of you are successful criminals, you're not really in a position to tell us this.
That I don't get, because I think anytime you're trying to deal with these kinds of threats in any kind of organization, whether you're a banking organization, you're a crypto organization, you're looking at the way in which people are trying to circumvent the system. And I think that's the thing that he was trying to explain, is that they had all those measures in place. Of course, both Sherman and Casten did not necessarily ask the question appropriately, so they didn't really get an answer because the question didn't really apply. So those are the problems that we're dealing with in DC. Now, this gets a little bit further. Listen to this next clip about off-chain transactions. See if you can catch it. Listen in.
I guess, Ms. House, is it theoretically possible that these numbers we're quoting, that was quoted in response to Mr. Torres' conversation, are vastly understating the amount of illicit activity happening with crypto?
Thank you for that question, Congressman. And I think it's extremely probable and very likely that those numbers are significantly underestimating the amount of illicit activity. I concur that blockchain analytics firms have been critical, and law enforcement and regulators rely on them. But the reality is that they're seeing the information that they have access to and that's available on-chain. They're not seeing off-chain activity. They don't know what law enforcement and agencies know. So that number globally would have been likely quite a lot higher.
Next, I'd like to examine another issue we've heard a good deal about from the other side of the aisle: off-chain transactions. Can you describe what an off-chain transaction is?
Thank you for the question, sir. I think there has been some confusion. I'm not aware of anything in the blockchain space called an off-chain transaction. So to the extent that we're discussing transactions that are not happening on the blockchain, that is traditional finance. The BSA and all its authorities apply to those.
Okay, so in practice, how would a bad actor try to use quote unquote off-chain transactions to cover their tracks based on kind of what you've already said here?
I mean, you're not using them. You're enjoying that you're not on the transparent ledger and just committing regular crime.
So to attribute those transactions to crypto crime is analytically wrong.
So such a weirdness that they would even understand what they're trying to say is traditional finance, traditional means of banking. That's the only thing that's off-chain, is what we know in the traditional banking system. So again, it gets back to this point of just, I hate to say it, but buffoons and clowns in these hearings really understand what's happening. I want to go to another one, because this gets into FinCEN, and actually this is the hearing right here, because it has both the Department of Treasury and also FinCEN both addressing the issues of these facts that have been claimed against crypto. Listen in, I've got a clip for you.
2023, the Wall Street Journal reported that Hamas received 41 million in digital assets, and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad received 93 million in digital assets. Is this Treasury's assessment?
The numbers noted in the Wall Street Journal piece talked about wallets, but not necessarily the, sort of disaggregated among the wallet's customers.
It's assets that people had in their wallets, as opposed to what was specifically going to Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas.
That's what we think is most likely. And we also assess that terrorists still prefer, frankly, to use traditional products and services. But
how much do you think actually got into the hands of Hamas or the Palestinian Islamic Jihad?
So we don't expect the number is very high, particularly.
I'd love to take you up on that, because I sent a letter with several other members right after this erroneous Wall Street Journal report. I want to be clear, digital assets were not even a popular tool for Hamas or the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, correct?
I think that's correct.
That's correct.
That's our assessment, yep.
And that certain senators are doing, trying to base legislation on that would literally destroy innovation in this country. And I take it that you don't have a position then as to whether Treasury has an obligation to correct this record with the data that they have. It seems to me that they would.
He was talking with the Undersecretary of Terrorism and Financial Intelligence of the Department of Treasury, and that was Brian Nelson. So that is the point, is that even they have acknowledged that this did not in fact happen, and the Wall Street Journal was false, as normal is what we're dealing with. Now, Richie Torres is another, I think, champion of crypto and what's happening in the space. He kind of looks at the market quite a bit differently, and I like his fresh approach to it. Listen to what he had to say.
The essence of financial enforcement is following the money, and the easiest place to follow the money is the blockchain. Suppose the Colonial Pipeline ransom had taken the form of fiat currency rather than cryptocurrency. Do you think it would have been retrieved, Mr. Rabin?
The answer is no, based on my experience.
So the question is not whether blockchain is perfectly transparent, right? The question is whether it is more transparent than the traditional alternative. Mr. Rabin, should we eradicate money in order to eradicate money laundering?
No, Congressman, we should not.
Okay. Should we eradicate the automobile in order to eradicate automobile accidents?
No, that would not make sense.
Okay. So is it fair to say that judging any emerging technology by its worst possible uses will probably lead to poorly conceived public policy?
That's correct, Congressman.
There's a quote for Will Smith, who said that racism is not getting worse, it's getting filmed. And I find that distinction to be useful. I'm wondering, is money laundering getting worse, or is it simply getting filmed? Is it simply more visible? And what is the difference in frequency between crypto money laundering and traditional money laundering?
I think you're exactly right, Congressman. I can say the global estimates for traditional finance is that 2 to 5% of global GDP is associated with money laundering, whereas analytics firms typically estimate to the amount to be 1% or lower.
We know from SolarWinds that foreign adversaries can easily hack into the computer systems of both the federal government and corporate America. And I want to know, how hackable is the blockchain? Has the Ethereum blockchain ever been breached?
No.
Has the Bitcoin blockchain ever been hacked into?
Congressman, Bitcoin is the most secure piece of software to have ever been created by humans.
All right, so further into what's happening out there, now we go to the state level, and now you have to look at what's happening in Wyoming. This, of course, happened this week, February 15th, and this is the Wyoming stablecoin agenda. They're much further along in what's, I think, the opportunity of regulation. And of course, if you guys did not catch our Wyoming stablecoin bill video, go back and look at our channel. You can get right there, Wyoming stablecoin. We pulled it in about 2 weeks ago. And further into this, we actually got a little bit of a mention during the hearing there. Listen in.
And then finally, there was a cryptocurrency analyst named Paul Barron. He's got a YouTube podcast that covered the work we've been doing with the Stable Token Commission, which received over 10,000 views in 24 hours. So there is certainly a lot of interest in what we're building here. And I think that those metrics kind of fortify that.
Anyway, the point being is that I think, at least from a Wyoming standpoint, they're starting to move forward on trying to get this selected in terms of a stablecoin. And in fact, they actually joined Warpcast. You guys have heard us talk about this. This was one of their first posts that they put up on Warpcast. And just remember, Warpcast is within the ETH ecosystem. So don't know how this is going to be a cross-chain, what's going to be involved here in terms of the decision process, but the fact that we've got a stablecoin now moving very quickly through the state of Wyoming, and which I think will start to push the rest of the states to possibly look at this for future regulation. So a lot of opportunities here, and hopefully more and more awareness. That's the main thing, is awareness is getting in front of these lawmakers and hopefully going to make some changes for regulation coming fast. All right, if you guys are not part of the Diamond Circle, get in now. Or you can catch me out there on X, @Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.